I have some great news. Something's happened in Jamaica that a lot of us been waiting for a long time. Crime in Jamaica reduced significantly, to the point that from the start of this year, Jamaica recorded the lowest number of homicides in 22 years. Not only that, Jamaica's unemployment rate fell to the record low, 4.2%. To put it in context, it's actually better than in some so-called developed countries like Germany or Canada. None of this is accidental. It's the result of what's been described as the most remarkable but underappreciated turnaround stories in economic history. I live in Jamaica, so I was just waiting in anticipation for the mainstream media to finally acknowledge the progress. Jamaica often gets bad press, but the facts are here. What are they going to say now?
A new warning for American travelers headed to the Caribbean due to violent crime.
65 murders in Jamaica and 18 murders in the Bahamas reported since January 1st of 2024.
The State Department is warning about safety risks because of an increase in crime in the region.
We told you about the Bahamas. Now we're talking about Jamaica.
The State Department bumping up the advisory level from 2 to 3 in Jamaica, urging Americans to reconsider travel there
Because of crime and a lack of medical care.
Home invasions, armed robberies, sexual assaults, and homicides are common.
Those security alerts are a response to reports of violent crime on the islands.
What is this? I mean, seriously, they don't want to give a pat on the back. Fair enough, Jamaica is doing it for Jamaica after all. But such a slap in the face? Blunt, straightforward lie all over the US media? Really? Well, here's something you might not realize. It wasn't just a slap in the face of Jamaica, or the Bahamas for that matter. Accidentally, it was a slap in the face of the US government. You see, travel advisories are not a joke. You cannot just misuse them to manipulate public opinion like that. There are United Nations guidelines as to how travel advisories should be covered in the media. Exploiting the government system of travel advisories to disinform American citizens is not okay. Not even if it was done by someone who works for that government. I'm not going to speculate who did it, why, or why now. I don't even care if they get away with it. It's for the State Department to investigate. But I am going to expose what they did and how. And my dear audience, I rarely ask you, but please watch this video to the end and then share it all over the internet. Let's not underestimate the power of social media. There are two separate things to address. One is the system of travel advisories itself, and the other is the media coverage of travel advisories. When it comes to the case of Jamaica and the Bahamas, we'll address both here. But there is one more video that gives you a full guide to travel advisories in general and all the main issues with them. So after you finish watching this episode, please check out that one. Now let's start with the media and look at some headlines.
Jamaica, Bahamas, and parts of Europe under travel advisory.
This is an interesting headline because every country has a travel advisory. There is also a designated country page with all the detailed information placed in categories. So all countries are under travel advisory. But I'm sure that's not the impression people get when reading this headline. This is because this article withholds the context deliberately. But at least it is not lying, unlike the next ones.
Jamaica spike in murders triggers travel warning to Americans visiting Caribbean island nation. U.S. urges travelers to reconsider visiting Jamaica amid violence. The crimes have become so pervasive that tourists aren't even safe in the shelter of their resorts, the U.S. Embassy said.
Well, they didn't. The US Embassy never said any of this. They never claimed that the resorts were unsafe or that there is an increase in crime or violence in Jamaica. And that's because there isn't. No spike in murders or any other crime, nothing like that. In fact, it's the opposite, like I have already mentioned at the start. If we look at the whole year in 2023, the number of murders reduced by 7%. So if the question, is it safe to travel to Jamaica right now, the simple answer, it is safe, would be an understatement, because Jamaica right now is even safer than it has always been. What I find the most astonishing with this media coverage is that they didn't just lie, claiming the crime increased when it actually decreased. In some cases, they went to the extent of presenting Jamaica's progress in the fight against crime as a bad thing by distorting the data and taking it out of context. Here's a good example.
Jamaica travel warning issued after 65 murders in just 4 weeks.
Every life is important, and even one murder is already one more than it should ever be. But this article is bringing up the statistics. And statistically, if Jamaica continues with 65 homicides per month, it will be under 800 per year, which would make Jamaica a country with a rather low homicide rate in the Western Hemisphere. But of course, because the readers are not aware of this context, they can easily be misled by such statements. The best part of this article, though, is not the headline, it's the masterful choice of the language. The State Department issued a stark travel warning. Stark. And it wasn't a travel warning, it was a travel advisory. These are different things. Cautioning that Jamaica has been rocked by 65 murders this month. Rocked. And this journalist is aware that the number of homicides in Jamaica reduced significantly. But just look at how she completely distorts this information and flips it around. Shockingly, the high murder rate is down from last year. 81 people were killed in the first month of 2023. Do you see what I mean about the language? And 2 weeks later, this very same journalist was covering a story on the tragic event of the mass shootings in the US. And she was not using this language nor bringing up any statistics. Imagine if she did. The United States have been rocked by 656 mass shootings last year. That's almost 2 mass shootings per day. Shockingly, such high mass shooting rate is up. It increased by 240% in the last 10 years. She didn't do it because it's inappropriate, yet for some reason it was okay when she was talking about a travel advisory for Jamaica. But here's a question. If crime in Jamaica has decreased and it's safe to travel, what about this?
The State Department escalated its warning for Jamaica to a level 3 travel advisory.
They didn't. Nobody escalated anything. This travel advisory at level 3 has been sitting there from the 14th of March 2022. Even the US Embassy in Jamaica admitted that. And guess what? Before that, it had been at level 4, saying do not travel. That was because of COVID. But bringing it to level 3 was actually de-escalation. So people were encouraged to travel. The most fascinating about this case, no one's been paying any attention to that travel advisory until suddenly, 2 years later, it's the news.
U.S. issues level 3, travel warning for Jamaica. What to know?
Well, what to know is that the State Department reissues travel advisories on a regular basis. It's a routine procedure that happens once or several times per year for every country. As an example, this is when and how many times travel advisories were issued for Jamaica. For other countries, it can even be more, but none of this is usually covered by the news. This time, it was different. On the 26th of January 2024, a large media campaign was launched with a goal to disinform the US citizens and discourage them from traveling to the Caribbean. It first targeted the Bahamas. The story claimed the travel advisory was increased to level 2, and it wasn't. It's been at level 2 for years. They also made it sound as if level 2 is a warning, but it's not. Even level 3 is not a warning. Most countries are at level 2, including places like Denmark or Sweden or the Bahamas. And most important point that proves that this was a disinformation campaign, they claimed that the advisories for Jamaica and the Bahamas were reissued due to crime. The information about crime in the current advisories is identical to the one from the previous advisories. This is the proof for the Bahamas, and this is the proof for Jamaica. But before you blame the media, imagine you are a journalist and you're getting a press release from some official source. And that press release also provides the instructions as to how the story should be published. What are you going to do? Well, some professional journalists checked the information provided, saw it was false, and didn't know what to do.
Make a story about a spike in murders in Jamaica.
I'm sorry, I've checked. They've decreased.
I don't care if they've decreased. You're the journalist. Work something out.
Americans planning a winter break in the Bahamas or Jamaica have been told to watch where they go.
There are similar concerns in Jamaica, where the U.S. recently reissued a Level 3 warning, meaning reconsider travel. We spoke with tourists in Nassau.
Keep an eye out.
Yeah.
That's my big thing. Keep an eye out.
There were a few other exceptions that didn't listen to that nonsense in that press release. For example, CNN. Their story coverage was very different from everyone else. No attempts to make it a sensation. They actually pointed out that the level of travel advisories hadn't changed. However, if you analyze how the story was pushed by every single media outlet, you'll see that most reports had a similar structure and in some pieces used exactly the same language. First, they would start with a spike in murders in the Caribbean island nation, then mention the spring break for Americans, and then pull out exactly the same two sentences from the middle of the travel advisory to quote first. And it's interesting that most of them chose exactly the same parts of the travel advisory to quote and ignored the rest of it. And the fun fact, the rest of it was actually the important information to report. And in case you're not aware, this copy-pasting is not typical for American media. The other evidence that this entire campaign was orchestrated is the date when the stories were published. The travel advisories were indeed reissued, but for Jamaica it was on the 23rd of January, while for the Bahamas it was on the 26th. But for some reason the media decided to look at the Bahamas first, hardly saying anything about Jamaica, and then suddenly, from the 30th of January, tons of reports about Jamaica. What exactly were they waiting for?
Oh, you know there are new travel advisories coming up. Do the story on the Bahamas.
What about Jamaica?
Nope. Wait for 7 days. And then do it.
Maybe the main goal behind the press release and all this media campaign was to really inform the US citizens of the new changes. Even though the level of travel advisories remained the same, there are some changes. Not related to crime, but still quite important, and people need to know about them. Yet, most media outlets said nothing about the changes, like literally ignored the actual news and focused on the old stuff that's been there for 2 years. There were only a few reports that mentioned something about the changes, but with a short phrase deliberately distorting the information by popping in a word that wasn't there. The US government has raised its travel alert level for Jamaica. They didn't. Amid a spate of murders in the Caribbean nation, there wasn't one. Urging Americans to reconsider visiting the island due to crime and unreliable medical services. The travel advisory never claimed that medical services in Jamaica were unreliable. It said they could be expensive or that ambulance services can be limited in rural communities, which doesn't imply that medical services are unreliable. And it would be incorrect to claim that because medical services in Jamaica are pretty good. So what were the actual changes in the recent travel advisories? Let's have a look. The advisory for the Bahamas now has new information, which is warning the travelers to be cautious when swimming and engaging in water activities, advising to check the local weather and marine alerts. It also says you have to be mindful of sharks, as there have been recent fatal and non-fatal incidents involving sharks. And this is an example of an issue with the travel advisory itself. It doesn't provide any numerical data nor any context, such as that statistically shark attacks are extremely rare. But Americans reading this travel advisory might think, oh, wow, maybe there are way too many sharks in the Bahamas. Dangerous. Let's go to Florida instead. And of course, the State Department doesn't issue travel advisories for the United States, so people might not be aware that while the Bahamas had one shark attack in 2023, Florida had 16. And in general, Florida is the place with the highest number of shark attacks. This is an example of the situation when, because of the travel advisory, you might make a wrong decision, which in turn might put your health and life at a greater risk. I discuss this problem and its consequences in more detail in my other video, which is dedicated to the issues with travel advisories in general. So please don't forget to check it out. As for the changes in the reissued travel advisory for Jamaica, this situation is really strange and confusing.
This is what they added, all related to medical services. I particularly find this part interesting.
We strongly encourage you to obtain traveler's insurance, including medical evacuation insurance, before traveling to Jamaica. The Department of State does not pay medical bills. Be aware that U.S. Medicare/Medicaid does not apply overseas.
This is extremely useful information. So why have they added this just now? This should have always been a part of the travel advisory for every country, right? Yet, that's not the case, and Jamaica is the only one that has it. Well, here's why.
Remember I said that the State Department publishes a travel advisory for every country, but there is also a designated country page with all the detailed information placed in categories, including safety, security, healthcare information, and so on. So let's take a look at this country profile page for Jamaica and compare it to some other island nation, not even in the Caribbean. Let's take random ones, Fiji and Cabo Verde. Now open the health section and you'll see something quite interesting.
We strongly recommend supplemental insurance to cover medical evacuation. We do not pay medical bills. Be aware that U.S. Medicare/Medicaid does not apply overseas.
So all new information they added to the Jamaica Travel Advisory is not new at all. It's always been there, just in the country profile, but somebody decided to pull it out of the country profile and place it directly into the advisory. Not for every country, just for Jamaica. What I find the most interesting, though, is that country-specific healthcare information is pretty much the same for these three countries. They're even using exactly the same words to describe this.
Ambulance services are not widely available, and training and availability of emergency responders may be below U.S. standards, not equipped with state-of-the-art medical equipment. Injured or seriously ill travelers may prefer to take a taxi or private vehicle.
Basically, they copy-pasted all of this information, telling us that Jamaica, Fiji, and Cabo Verde have pretty much the same level of medical care. Well, according to them, Cabo Verde has a little bit more issues with the healthcare system than Jamaica and Fiji, but that's not a problem. The problem is that Jamaica has a travel advisory that says Level 3 reconsider travel due to medical services, while Fiji and Cabo Verde don't. Their travel advisories are at Level 1.
So medical services are the same, according to the State Department, not me. But here, they're saying this is okay. But in the case of Jamaica, this is not okay, to the point that you should reconsider travel.
Some small island nations do not have any healthcare infrastructure on most of their islands at all. But it's okay, they are still at Level 1. But not Jamaica, a country with over 320 health centers, 24 public hospitals, numerous private hospitals, and 55 doctors per 100,000 population. This is a country information for Mozambique now.
Medical facilities are rudimentary, and most medical providers do not speak fluent English. Frontline health providers are often poorly trained, and medicine shortages are common. Mozambique's health infrastructure is limited. There are only 3 doctors per 100,000 people.
I checked, there are 8 doctors, not 3, so I'm not sure how accurate the rest of this State Department advisory for Mozambique, but in the world of the State Department information, Jamaica has a way better medical services than Mozambique by far. But the travel advisory for Mozambique due to healthcare issues is at Level 2, while Jamaica is at Level 3. If you think this doesn't make any sense, you're right, it doesn't. So I decided to look at the other point they were making, reconsider travel due to crime. Let's compare Jamaica with Jamaica.
The system of levels in travel advisories is actually quite recent. It was introduced in January 2018, and the very first travel advisory for Jamaica was at level 2, exercise increased caution in Jamaica due to crime. Today it's at level 3, reconsider travel due to crime. So according to the State Department, it was safer to travel to Jamaica in the beginning of 2018 than in the beginning of 2024. Now let's look at the statistics. 2023 had 1,393 homicides, and at the end of 2017, the number of homicides was 1,647. In fact, in 2017 there was a spike in crime to the point that Jamaican government even announced a state of emergency to fight crime, yet the travel advisory remained at level 2.
And it was accurate, because crime was not and is not something that usually affects tourists in Jamaica, as you will see in a minute. But the point is that the State Department is advising that it was okay to travel to Jamaica back then when crime was higher, but now when crime has reduced and there are 15% less homicides in the country, you might want to reconsider travel due to crime. Still doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, it does. The current travel advisory for Jamaica is incorrect, and it's been like this from 2022. And the reason for that is very simple. The State Department relied on a source that is obviously inaccurate. The US travel advisories for Jamaica have always pointed out that the country has an issue with crime. Not so much all crime, but homicides. And unfortunately, it's true, yes, there is progress, but still the locals are being affected. However, travel advisories are not written for the locals. They are written for American visitors. So how does Jamaican homicide rate, that the media likes to highlight all the time, apply to tourists? This is what the State Department used to say about crime in Jamaica.
While the vast majority of crimes occur in impoverished areas, random acts of violence, such as gunfire, may occur anywhere. The primary criminal concern for tourists is becoming a victim of theft.
This information was relevant for American visitors, but a few years ago somebody decided to change this information completely, and it has become not only irrelevant and inaccurate, but also confusing.
Violent crimes such as home invasions, armed robberies, sexual assaults, and homicides are common. Sexual assaults occur frequently, including at all-inclusive resorts.
What exactly do they mean by common and frequently? Well, let's look at the actual data. There were over 3 million US visitors to Jamaica in 2023, 52 criminal incidents. This is the total number of all crime recorded that mentions American citizens. And important to note here, vast majority of those American citizens were actually Jamaicans, some of whom were involved in illegal activity. Out of these crimes, 5 were homicides, all of whom were, again, Jamaican Americans who were not in resort areas, and of which 2 were gang-related, 2 robberies, and 1 interpersonal conflict.
Homicide rate is calculated by 100,000 people. So in case of Jamaica, the homicide rate of American visitors is 0.17. And if you look at the homicide rate of American tourists last year, not just any visitors, but specifically people on vacation, it is 0. And that's what the State Department calls common and frequently. But as you can see, serious crimes against foreign visitors, especially tourists, are very rare in Jamaica. The data also show that sex crimes involving tourists noted in the travel advisory were mainly perpetrated by other Americans and foreign nationals on vacation, not local Jamaicans. But for some reason, the travel advisory doesn't mention this data. So as a result, people who are coming to Jamaica with a new partner they've just recently met on Tinder would not be aware of that risk. If you wish to see the most inaccurate sections of this travel advisory, take a look at this long list of do not travel locations. This is where I realized that whoever wrote this list a few years ago didn't really know Jamaica that well. You would expect they do, right? As a person assigned to do an official report for the State Department, but it seems they don't have even the basic understanding of the country. It's either that or they do, but intentionally misinform the State Department. Which one is it? Let me show you what I mean.
St. James Parish, Montego Bay, do not travel. All of Montego Bay on the inland side of the A1 highway and the Queen's Drive from San San to Harmony Beach Park.
You see, I've recently moved to Kingston, but I spent 9 years living in Montego Bay, precisely on the inland side of A1 highway. So let me share with you my experience as a foreigner living in the do not travel zone.
This is A1 highway. It goes all along the north coast of Jamaica. And this is the inland area they're talking about. For instance, Ironshore and Coral Gardens. Just look how terrible these areas are. I mean, these mansions with swimming pools and gardens, these roads with palm trees. Oh, these middle-class and upper-class communities in Jamaica, full of these dangerous retired people and expats. And they're renting out these homes on Airbnb. What are they even thinking? Why are there 5-star reviews? But there is more to this dangerous inland side of A1 highway. For example, Spring Farm community. This is where some Jamaican millionaires happen to live. The whole community is just a lot of luxurious private villas that most people can only dream.
No, the Travel Advisory specifically tells you not to go there. It's dangerous, don't you see? They even have a golf club. Level 4, do not travel. The same risk to Americans as Gaza. According to the State Department, not me. Look, I'm not mocking the travel advisory system. Whoever wrote this nonsense and disinform the State Department and make them publish this is the person mocking the system. And I just quoted a few examples from the content. But if you look at a bigger picture, the situation is even more serious.
This is the full list of 24 countries that are currently at Level 3 Travel Advisory. Unlike most of them, Jamaica is a democratic country that is not involved in any armed conflicts with its neighbors and does not suffer from civil unrest, no military uprisings, terrorist attacks, international piracy, bombings, random mass shootings, or mass kidnappings. Not even the US can make this claim. This is a full list of Level 2 countries, and according to the State Department, they're safer for the US citizens. But in reality, the risks of harm to Americans in Jamaica are much lower than, for instance, in these Level 2 countries. In several of these destinations, American tourists have been murdered or found dead outside hotels and tourist areas in cartel-related shootings. In others, tourists have found themselves caught up in major international or domestic disputes, armed conflicts, or terroristic attacks, which have spilled over into tourist areas.
US visitors to Jamaica are not subject to similar kind of risks and harm, but Jamaica is at Level 3. And among Level 2 and Level 1 countries, there are plenty that don't have such a sophisticated healthcare system like Jamaica does. But the State Department doesn't tell them to reconsider trip there. And this is where you should be asking a question. Hold on a minute. What is going on? I'm glad you asked. All travel advisories are issued by the State Department, specifically by the Bureau of Consular Affairs. They're responsible for them and they are the ones writing them, technically. Obviously, these people cannot possibly know everything about every country, so they heavily rely on the variety of sources, including intelligence reports, international statistical data, and of course the reports from the US embassies and consulates across the world. They provide on-the-ground information. It is clear from the Travel Advisory for Jamaica that one or more of these sources provided the Bureau of Consular Affairs with incorrect information, basically misinformed them. Whether this was done by accident or intentionally, whether they had justified reasons to do so or not, I don't know. And I'm not going to speculate. What's really important, though, is the consequences of such actions. You see, there have been cases of travel advisories being used as a political tool to influence the tourism-dependent countries. More on this in the Travel Advisory Guide video. But I don't think the State Department would have misused travel advisories for political influence on Jamaica. Not because it says so on the website, but because it goes against the interest of the United States in the region. Look, I don't want to go into geopolitics or any kind of politics, but it's just simple maths. Jamaica's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, with most tourists coming from the United States. If the travel advisory is misused to deter American visitors, Jamaican economy will take a hit and will have to focus on some other industries to survive. For instance, the bauxite mining. And you know that most bauxite industry in Jamaica belongs to Russia? So I seriously doubt this course of events is in any interest of the United States. I'm just not sure if the person or people who were orchestrating this media campaign against Jamaica took a moment to think about that. Look, if there were indeed some serious issues affecting the safety and security of American visitors to Jamaica, it would have made sense to change the travel advisory and run this media campaign to warn people. But there are no issues. The entire story is made up. What were they thinking? That no one would notice or won't dare to speak against it? The governments of Jamaica and the Bahamas have been pushing against these advisories from the start, and the Jamaican government was also asking the State Department to revise its advisory because it's damaging to the country economy. However, it looks like the problem is way bigger than that. Not only this travel advisory is damaging for Jamaica, it is damaging for the State Department and American citizens. If safety and security of Americans abroad is really their priority, how can they seriously be advising to their citizens that the level of risk of traveling to Colombia or Israel is exactly the same as the level of risk of traveling to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica? Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing today is one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of State Department travel advisory system. Because not only this advisory disinforms and misguides American citizens who wish to travel to Jamaica, it also undermines the entire system of travel advisories for all other countries. Because it basically does the opposite of what it's designed to do. How are Americans supposed to rely on these travel advisories when we have a situation like this? Who is the person or people responsible for putting the State Department in such a position? You see, the United States is probably the most powerful country in the world. But there is one force that is way more powerful than the US government. And that force is American citizens. The US is a democracy, right? So my dear American audience, it's about 40% of you on my channel, 260,000 people. Are you happy with the work of your government when it comes to travel advisories that are designed to protect your safety and security and instead get misused in the media to disinform you? If you're not happy, can you let the State Department know, please? There are several ways how you can contact the State Department directly, and I will leave the links in the description and in the pinned comment. Please make sure you keep your message very polite, short, and to the point, and include the links to these two videos. Well, I don't expect you to start a petition to change Jamaica's travel advisory, but American citizens can do that, so if you're willing to help, let me know. My email here. For all of my audience who are Americans and not Americans, please share this video all over the internet. Social media, WhatsApp messages, all of your friends, especially your American friends, your former American guests or your future American guests, please Let's not allow people to abuse their power and their connections to disinform Americans and manipulate public opinion with the help of their fake media campaigns. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have found this video useful. I usually feature the list of my patrons, but since this video is talking about US government system, I don't want to drag them into this kind of political situation. So this time I just want to thank you. I really appreciate your help and support. You know who you are. For everyone else, if you believe our work is important and you also wish to support our channel, you can do so from only $5 a month. Thank you once again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.